Today we're talking about advertising on Google, which is arguably the most important and least understood channel by CMOs. Keep in mind that Google's net income, not their gross income, their net income is $16 billion dollars a quarter. So it's a massive channel, clearly. And it's also a channel that almost completely consists of consumers or shoppers signaling exactly what they're looking for. This is the second time I've had a colleague join the pod. The first one was way back in episode 3, covering search engine optimization and what a CMO needs to know about SEO. My guest today, Luanne Marek, is a badass. She and her team have spent more than $1 billion on Google advertising some of the world's biggest brands. And she has run all of these campaigns on a performance basis, meaning she and her team are buying the ads and then they're only paid when a customer is acquired. So Luanne is really uniquely qualified to understand how to acquire more customers from your paid search campaigns. The other thing about Luanne is in head-to-head tests with competitors, competing agencies, basically, she typically beats them by 75% or more on the metrics of number of customers acquired per thousand impressions and cost per acquisition. So, really interesting, insightful conversation. We talk about why folks on her team operate like day traders. We talk about the future of Google Ads. And if you've ever thought about fostering a dog, in the first couple of minutes of our conversation, Luanne will pitch you on that and hopefully converts you. Hi, Luanne. Good to see you.
Hi, John. Good to see you too.
Thanks for talking to me today. You know, normally, and today is no different, you have a handful of dogs over your right shoulder. Um, they're never the same, but they're always cute. Tell the listeners what you do and why.
Yeah, so my second job on top of doing media buying is I foster, and I probably have fostered close to 100 dogs at this point, and it's awesome. I bring new pups in, get them adopted, and get to continue saving more.
How the heck do you part ways with the cute ones? How often? They're all cute, but the really cute ones.
No, and that's it's probably the most common question that people ask is how do you give them up? And I always tell them, well, one, it's awesome because most of my adopters stay in touch with me, so I kind of have dogs all over the place. And then two, I know every time I give one up, I get to save another. So it makes it a lot easier.
That's amazing. If listeners want to get involved with fostering dogs, what's the first step to doing so?
Yeah, so there's most shelters and rescue agencies are dying for fosters right now. The more fosters we have, the more pups we can save. So just reach out to your local rescue or shelter. Let them know that you're able to foster. It's usually a pretty quick, easy process. And one of the most amazing things about fostering, especially taking them from like a shelter, is if you ever look at a picture of a dog in a shelter, they're usually kind of cowered in the corner. When a foster takes them, you can get to know their personality, take cute pictures of them, really get a good bio about them. You wouldn't believe how many dogs you would never think would get adopted from a shelter, and then they do because a foster was able to really get to know them and advertise them.
Nice, that's really cute and amazing. All right, well, let's segue into why we got on the phone
Yeah.
today. Um, so we're going to talk about Google advertising, and let's first start with a couple of definitions to level set. So the first place I'd love you to define for me is what is brand advertising in search or in Google versus non-brand advertising? And maybe for the sake of example, we can pretend we're talking about a credit card like Chase credit cards.
Yeah, so the brand advertising would be advertising on your brand. So you're showing an ad when someone looks for your brand. In that case, it'd be Chase credit card, Chase points, whatever it is that has your brand name in the search query that they're looking for. Non-brand or would be if someone's just generally looking for credit cards. So something like credit cards for travel, or the most points I can get with credit cards. So that would be the difference.
Okay. And then also one other area of definition. So Google's advertising runs as an auction. So if I want my advertisement placed at the top when someone searches for best credit cards for airline miles, what do I need to do if I want to be at the top? Maybe the basics of how the Google auction works.
Yeah, so it's all based on ad rank. And ad rank, the majority of that is going to be due to what you're willing to pay, so what your bid is. But it also has to do with your quality score. So, how quality is your ad copy? How quality is the landing page that you're sending them to? And just historically, how many people are clicking through to your site from your ad copy? So the combination of those things create what your ad rank is, and that's how Google slots you based on what your ad rank is.
And then who determines how good your landing page is? You mentioned there's a quality score. Like who's the arbiter of what quality means?
Well, ultimately, it's the user actually. So Google looks at the stats from when someone clicks through to your site and what are they doing once they hit your site. So does it seem like what happened once they hit your site that the user was seeing what they wanted to see and they are interacting with your site?
Okay, so Google ranks the ad based on how much you're willing to pay, how often someone clicks on your ad when they see it, and then their determination of how good of an experience it is for the users once they click through. Okay, so let's start with brand advertising. Why, I guess maybe a fair question to ask is when someone's searching for your brand, like Chase credit cards or whatever, why does Chase need to advertise for that? I mean, it's someone searching for it. They clearly want to go to your website, right? Why would why would Chase or anyone spend money advertising when someone searches for their own brand?
Yeah. So a couple things. One is, and the main one is going to be conquesting. So if you're a well-known brand or even a semi-well-known brand, there are likely going to be competitors out there that are going to bid on your brand because when someone's looking for a brand, they're pretty deep in the funnel of wanting to convert. There's typically two reasons someone's looking for your brand. It's either they're looking for your brand because they want to um, buy something or join whatever you have, or it's because they're already a customer of yours and they want to interact with you in some way. So if you're not there, likely someone else is going to be there. And it's likely not going to be very expensive for them to be there if you're not, because if there's no competition on it, they're paying very little. As you said, it's an auction, so the more people who are in there, the more you're going to pay for it. But the good thing is, because it is your brand, if you're bidding on your brand, because that experience is going to be the best that Google can see, you're going to pay very little to bid on your brand. And the conquestors will not be able to compete with you to stay in there, or at least stay in there in the top.
So conquesting is when I own a brand and I'm bidding when someone searches for my competition. That's essentially
Yeah,
how.
so in your example of Chase, it would be Bank of America bidding on Chase's term. So someone looks for Chase credit card, and if Chase wasn't there, Bank of America would be there saying, "Hey, get a Bank of America credit card. It's better than Chase."
Okay. And one of the things you mentioned is that someone might be there because they want to buy or they think they do or they want to know more about your brand. And then also there might be it might be an existing customer. How do you accommodate for that in the ad itself? Do you have the same ad no matter what, or do you try to change the ad based on what the consumer is searching for?
Yeah, so you Google has really moved into RSAs, which are responsive search ads. And one of the nice things about that is Google typically knows what someone is looking for based on their search history. So what you really want to do is make sure that you have enough headlines. So what an RSA is you put many different headlines and many different descriptions in your possible ad copy for Google to choose. And then they'll choose a combination of what they think that user is going to have the most chance to click on based on what they know about their history. So it's really just making sure that you have a pretty wide variety of copy in there so that Google can choose the right ones. And then the other important thing is having your first party data in there, making sure that you have all of your existing customers, any data that you have to make that search, make Google smarter with how they're showing your results.
Okay, that's a really interesting concept, first party data. So if it's first party, that implies that you as the media buyer are grabbing that data. Where does that data come from? What are the top elements that a marketer should think through? And then how do you give it to Google? How does Google get it?
Yeah, so the couple of places you would get it from is any interaction on your site. You can get it through interaction with, if you have a call center, any interaction with that call center, and your customer list. So anyone who's actually already a customer of yours. Clearly, the customer list is going to be the easiest one to get because you have the most first party data about your own customers. So there's several different ways to get that data into Google, but the biggest way that you would do that is through customer match. So you do have to make sure that you have some information about that user. So you want them to log in, you want them to fill out a form, and when you get that information about them, you're able to then send that to Google and have them connect who that person is when they're out there searching.
Got it. Okay, and then what does Google? I mean, I'm not wonder if people have like yellow flags going up. So what does Google promise it does and doesn't do with that first party data that you're providing to
Yeah,
Google?
so all of the first party data that you provide is only accessible in your account. They don't use that to create, audiences for other accounts. Everything is hashed. Nothing is accessible to anyone.
Okay, good. All right, so back to brand advertising. So what I'm taking away is you have to really own your brand space, not just once someone has come to your site, but one step before when someone's in the Google ecosystem and they're searching for anything, any permutation where your brand name is in there, you have gotta own that. I actually want to ask about some best practices there, but before I do, um, on average, how many ads does Google show before, I'm looking at my mobile phone, I'm scrolling until I get the top one that's organic, meaning that nobody paid to be there. It's what Google thinks is the most relevant or best page for that query.
Yeah, so that's called ad depth, and that means how many ads is Google showing on any given search query. Uh, it's different based on each brand. I would say that we see anywhere between 4 to 8 ads. That doesn't mean that those are all at the top. So there's also ads at the bottom of the page. But any well-known brand will likely have 3 to 4 ads at the top of the page before you even get to the organic results, which means that especially on a mobile phone where the majority of searches are happening today, you are not even going to see that organic result. So it really is important that you have your brand owning that space in between the ads and the organic results.
I think I know what you're going to say to this, but a brand wants to be at the top, right? The number one. Okay.
Of
What
course.
percentage of clicks or impressions, if you know this, does that top position command?
Yeah, so the top positions, again, it's going to all be based on your ad rank. It's going to be based on what you're willing to pay. Your goal would be to have close to 100% impression share, which means for all of the impressions that you're getting, how often is your ad showing? I'd say the brand is typically in the 98 to 100% impression share when you're bidding on your own brands for that position one. Um, they're going to get the lion's share of the clicks. You're likely going to see 80% of the clicks go into that position one, but it also really depends on who's bidding behind you.
Hmm.
If you have, if there's conquesting going on and they have some really strong copy, really strong offers that they're trying to pull some of your customers away from you, you can start seeing that go down.
Hmm. Okay. So, how often do you monitor when you're running brand advertising for a company and you're in the number one position? How often are you monitoring what others are doing, that number two, number three, number four, like which companies their ad copy? What's your MO there?
Yeah, so we're actually looking at it daily. We use Google Auction Insights, which is a report that Google you can pull, and it shows you who is in position behind you, and we can also within there see how often are they, not how often, not only how often they're showing up, but how often are they showing up above you. So it's really important to keep that. It's called position above rate. It's really important to keep their position above rate as close to zero as possible. Anytime we see a fluctuation in someone's impression share or position above rate, we're typically going to go in and do an audit to figure out what are they doing, what ad copy are they using, what landing page are they using, how are they possibly taking these customers away from us.
Hmm. Okay, so it's a 24/7 looking at the
It
auction.
is, and even on top of that, our media buyers they almost act like day traders actually. It's really cool how they're monitoring their accounts. They're looking at full funnel results for every ad group that we have on an hourly basis and measuring what all of those important KPIs are, all the way down to what profit is on an hourly basis and making adjustments as needed.
Wow. How many ad groups in total are you looking at?
I'd say for any given account, it's several thousand.
Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, I can see typically you're working with companies that are spending material amounts on Google, so I can see how that's important. One of the things that was really crazy to see when you and I started working together was how many more customers you could acquire from Google than like your standard campaign was doing before you took it over. It's not like 2% or 5%, like it's major. It's like 50, 100, 150. And what I took away from that is personalization and context is like is like the key. And I wouldn't have expected that because once someone clicks on once some so there's one thing if someone's competing with your brand term, but once somebody's decided to click on that ad and then go to your site, I was surprised at how much headroom there is. Maybe you can give some guidance to folks who are listening, like the best practices for personalization and context.
Yeah. So uh, it's uh, one thing is I think a lot of when you think of like the typical agency that's running a lot of these brand campaigns, they kind of just most of the time will put some semi-relevant ad copy and send to a lot of times the same landing page as your organic results. But even if they are creating specific landing pages for paid search, it's usually just a static page, maybe a couple of variations based on a keyword. But what we've found and where we've really found the biggest success is that not only making sure your ad copy is customized with those RSAs that I was talking about earlier, but making sure that that totally flows through to the landing page. So, if someone is searching for, Chase credit card and what's the most points I can get for travel, you want to make sure that you're sending them to a page that really talks about your points, how they work towards your travel, and that's where we found in even just tweaking little bits of the content that are on that page, to make sure that it's more relevant to what the user is searching for. That's where we find those incremental wins constantly.
So you say constantly. Does that imply that you're doing experiments, or does that imply that like talk about that process?
Yeah, so the way that we're always looking at it, we have a tool within our system called Experiment Center. And it's basically a testing platform for landing pages. And we're constantly on any page we're running experiments where we're tweaking many times just something very minimal. Maybe it's copy, maybe it's the color of a button, maybe
Mm.
it's just the positioning of where something is. And we're running, hundreds of experiments on a monthly basis for our campaigns to make sure that we're always slightly tweaking it. And what's interesting is probably 80% of the experiments that we run actually don't pan out, which is fine. That's what we expect. That's why we run so many. But as you find those incremental, 5 to 10% wins, every one of those is just adding on top of what you already have.
That's good to hear that 80% of experiments fail, because I feel like when my team is doing experiments like on the corporate marketing side, like the first few almost always fail, and you're thinking to yourself like, why should I keep experimenting here? I want to go back to something earlier you said, Luanne. You were talking about how first party data can come from all kinds of places, like a lead form or your call center. Do you want are you trying to get your consumers to take a certain action? I mean, obviously you want them to purchase, but like, do you want to make them to make a phone call? Do you think about chat? Do you think about text? Do you think about e-commerce? How do you think about ranking those? And do you want to funnel folks into like one thing, or do you want to provide choice?
So that's actually one of the mistakes that we see a lot of these companies make is one, everyone has this new kind of digital first mentality of wanting to get everyone through maybe an e-com type of a purchase funnel, but not everyone wants to do that. And if you're not giving the consumer the choice, we have 5 different ways that someone can convert through SMS, chat, e-com, call in. So if we're not offering the consumer all of those different options, you are going to miss out on some of those people who just, I don't want to convert online. I want to talk to someone, or I just want to text with someone. And when you add in each one of those, you may say your e-com sales reduce a little bit. But it's not just moving from one bucket to another. You truly do see an incremental lift with each one of those added. And trying to force someone into one never is the right answer. You will end up losing some of those users every time you try and force them in a funnel. We will prioritize different
Hmm.
different ways to connect with us based on audiences, though. So we may see that a specific age range or a specific audience based on our first party data was converting better on call center versus ecom. So we may prioritize on the page how to get to our call center versus how to get to an ecom flow.
Fascinating. Um, so Google responsive ads, which you mentioned earlier in this conversation, how how new is that functionality? Because that's not how I remember last time I got in there and created an ad. That's not how I remember it.
Um, so it's been around. It's not super new. What is new though is they're getting rid of the ability to create standard text ads or expanded text ads.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so Google is really wanting to add in machine learning to everything that they're doing. And I kind of joke with our Google reps all the time, and I say, you guys are getting to the point where you just say, "Give me your money, and I'll tell you how to spend it." But in honesty, the machine learning honestly is a benefit to us in many ways, because what it's allowed us to do is our media buyers no longer have to spend time looking at every little area of where we can make a change, maybe on bidding or on ad copy, um, or in uh, what are you doing in a specific exact match keyword. because really there is no exact match anymore. Google kind of did away with that, even though there is exact match. There's so many close variants that show up with that. But what our team is now able to focus on is the optimization of all of those funnels. So they can look at, expansion of keywords. They can look at doing testing within ad copy and doing more testing in the landing pages. So really open them up to be able to analyze what's going on and do more experimentation.
Okay, so machine learning takes some of the busy work out of the equation and then allows you to think more about the digital experience, which what keywords are included in your brand space and that sort of thing. Um, okay, last question, and this has to do with from the framing of paid search as a CMO. What percentage of your budget, and I'm sure there's not like a fixed number, but what percentage of your paid search budget should be allocated to brand versus non-brand? Or maybe how do you think about those buckets differently and what they're intended to do?
Uh, yeah, so the budget's it's a difficult question. It's a difficult answer only because um, spending in brand search is not the same as spending in non-brand search. Brand search should be an extremely cost-effective, not very expensive channel for you because you're bidding on your own brand. CPCs should be extremely cheap. If they're not, then there's something going on there that you maybe need to look at a different agency working for you. But it should be a very cheap channel. That's really more about making sure you're not losing a customer or losing a deeper funnel conversion. On the non-brand side, that's really where you're going to be spending much higher CPCs because there's a huge amount of competition in that space. And you don't necessarily have the leg up because you're bidding on your own brand with your brand site. Everyone's kind of equal when it starts out because no one is the brand in this case. And now it's really about how much are you going to pay to compete with these other agents, with the other people that are in the space. So you can typically expect that your non-brand cost per acquisition is probably going to be 5 to 10x of what your brand is.
But those folks are like on the one hand, you might say those are folks you want to compete vigorously for because that's how you expand market share. They're the people who are like the true undecideds. That if they become your loyal customer, then you've taken someone away from the competition.
Yeah, we kind of call those our jump balls. They didn't know who they were going to convert with, so that it's a very different strategy than brand, where you're just trying to make sure in brand that the user is converting at the highest rate and they're not going to a competitor that's trying to steal it from you. Or in non-brand, that user doesn't know what they want yet, so you need to make
Hmm.
sure that you're giving them the best option to compete with all those others that are in the space.
Well, thanks, Luanne, for chatting today. Really appreciate it. And give those puppies a hug for me.
Thanks, John.